Hello and welcome to Fellowship of Geeks. I'm Jim.
I'm Diane.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe about today's topic. Diane, what is today's topic?
Well, I have a question. We own several 3D printers, and you have used and printed and painted and carried along with you many a 3D piece for an adventure.
Indeed. So is your question, when am I going to buy another one? Black Friday deals, but that's fine. Go on.
I proposed the October Friday deals.
And there hasn't been what I want again. I want another. I want another bamboo.
Okay.
But I was not ready to pay full price. I mean, there were some deals on others, but they're very popular right now. So I'm hoping closer to Black Friday, there's actual deals.
I might be happy then, because that means not a whole lot's printing at the moment, which means there's no painting going on at the moment.
The studio is quiet.
But I am concerned that means come closer to first of the year Gen Con Origins, we're going to have a ton of painting that needs to be done.
You would be, as usual, correct.
That part makes me a little nervous. So thinking about that, though, do you prefer running... this is going to end up a two-part question. Running a campaign with terrain pieces, or do you prefer using a map, or is it all kind of theater of the mind for you?
As much as I started out way back in the day running all theater of the mind, and some games lend themselves more to theater of the mind with certainly the evolution of Dungeons and Dragons since 3rd edition, kind of focusing, making it as much, putting on a grid map and making all those different pieces so you can see it, so you can do your tactics and things like that. I think I have naturally gravitated along with that to terrain. First it was Dwarven Forge, and now it's Fat Dragon 3D printed stuff that sadly does not come off the printer painted, but with the multicolor printing, I think that's coming. So there may be a
My
AMS
fingers are
with
crossed.
it. Don't get your hopes up just yet. There's still an airbrush around somewhere too. So I think I prefer that, but there are games that are very much theater of the mind. Call of Cthulhu, the Cats of Cthulhu, very much a theater of the mind game. Most horror games, beyond the supernatural, some of those lend themselves much better than that. There is not a miniature rule set for like Rifts or Palladium Fantasy. It's very easy to translate it into that, but there's not a hard and fast one. And like Savage Worlds very much lends itself to being run on a grid and is designed for minis and to be fast and furious and done that way. So some of it depends on the system, but a lot of what I run will have terrain, miniatures, the whole 9 yards. And then and sometimes the simpler ones, or ones more off the top of the head, are those dry erase maps and the different ones from the good old days of the Chessex, wet erase map,
Right.
to now they have the Loke battle mats and some of the different ones, like the ones from Yarrow Studios that have the appliques where you can put some terrain and stuff on that. So I've run, I ran a D&D hybrid of that when we did Castle Davenport, so I had 3D printed mimics and different pieces like that that kind of interspersed on the map of the actual house or the manor house maps that I used.
So let me separate the question a little bit. When you're running like your home campaign, right? We're going to get together frequently over several months. Is that easier or harder to do, or prefer to do with a map, or prefer to do with terrain, or all theater of the mind?
I mean, gosh, what I think it depends, and there's
a loaded question.
Right, there is no right answer. Certainly, using terrain takes more prep time.
Mm-hmm.
A fold out battle mat, or just a dry erase mat like that, for things like that, is much easier and quicker to do on the fly. Again, some of the printed book maps that lay flat and are wet dry erase and things like that, and have the application, you can put just some set pieces and clean up and things like that. I think those are much easier to do. Doing full-blown terrain all the time, especially if you don't have one of those, fancy dedicated tables where you can put the top on and have dinner and then take it back off and you're ready to go for
Right.
your night's adventure or your week's adventure. it's otherwise it's a lot of clean. It's a lot of prep work. So I think I only do those big games a couple times of the year. The pre-Thanksgiving game is always one.
I was thinking about that one. We're coming up close on that holiday. That is a huge one that you look forward to, our house looks forward to, our players look forward to, and for a long time was almost the only time you would get out the big terrain pieces. And I think that's what made it so special for the players to come in. They're like, oh man, the
Look at all the
pre-Thanksgiving
toys,
one,
right?
we're going to put out all the toys and play with all the stuff.
Yeah, pre-Thanksgiving Forge was always super, super popular. And that was, a dozen trips up and down the steps with all the heavy Dwarven Forge.
Yes.
And now it's like, oh, we don't need more Dwarven Forge. We can just print more because we have all the Fat Dragon files. And then you have to paint more, and then you have to find somewhere to store them. And
I still appreciate, though, they weigh much less. So even carrying those up and down the stairs, it's half as many trips because you can carry twice as much on a load, and so that's easier to do. And I worry less about, two things have happened.
Taking a chunk out of the dining room floor.
Well, our little guy is older, and so him knocking them off the table doesn't make me as nervous anymore, but also the fact that they're a better, different material.
Mm-hmm.
So the 3D printed part, A, doesn't crash and break nearly as easily, and B, is easy to replace and just print again should the need arise.
Right. So that's a nice feature as well. And again, and the nice thing about that is I know always one of the struggles with Dwarven Forge is like, oh, if I only had 3 more flat walls and 1 more corner, I could do all these other things. Or like, oh, I need a couple more pieces. And not as much for pre-Thanksgiving Forge, but planning con games and have this elaborate plan. It's like, oh, crush it down and crush it down and crush it down to make it fit. And I'm like, well, there's no way you're getting all that in 4 hours anyway. So that became an easier thing to do. But having that grandiose plan, we'll play for 5 or 6 hours. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's like, oh, we got to get to everything. And then there's always what was in that room over there that's under the card stock? Oh, too bad. I'm not going to show you. No, haha. They get to the review and go, and I'm like, that was mostly a show-off room with pretty stuff in it and really played no part in the actual game. I did it because I could, not because I needed to.
So talk to me a little bit, the difference between using the fold-out maps, and in our Gen Con review special, we talked about some of the spiral-bound map pieces that we brought home, and the use of those in mapping out a game. You're really kind of set and stuck with what the corners and edges of those walls look like. And so your game has to fit into the terrain, essentially, that's in that map.
You're a little bit pigeonholed in those and stuck with it. And there is a lot of flexibility, but at some point, what's in your mind is always going to be better.
And there is a lot of flexibility, and we own a lot of those types of maps. So there's lots of ways to choose and put together the pieces that you may want.
Yeah, there's at least 3 different companies worth of those, and then there were the new kind of 8.5 by 11 3-ring binder ones that we got from Gaming Paper this year. Mm-hmm. That'll be fun to utilize. And there was like the dungeon ones and the town ones, and I was like, okay, that's fun to lay out. And do those, and the OCD part of me is like, oh, they have to be sheet protected. Maybe we should laminate them. And then I'm like, oh my God, stop,
back up,
stop the insanity. Don't go down that rabbit hole.
That's why you bought those really cool gridded pieces that sit on top of the map, so you don't have to.
I know, but they have the little plastic kind of covering on them they shipped with because they're not supposed to rub together, or you rub those few pewter minis across them. You don't have those plastic ones, and then they're going to get scratched up.
No one weird gaming with has pewter minis.
I have pewter minis.
Yes, but you don't game with them.
Sure I do. I mean, when I play D&D, the one character I use is a pewter mini from Reaper from back in the day. When I play, and the last time I played D&D, when we were playing Strahd, he was the character I used because that's one of the best painting jobs I've ever done. And it's just a badass looking miniature.
Okay.
I'm like, whatever character I want to run, I'm like, how can I craft it into this mini? I mean, he's sweet looking. And I'm sure if I would get through that big tote of, unpainted bones, I'd probably find some other cool ones, but
you could practice how cool you could paint those.
I don't know. I think that's my magnum opus. I should just stop there and leave it be. I mean, certainly for a character that I would play. For the great unwashed to play, that's fine. You can deal with my painting job. And I'm like, I painted these and these are crap. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's so good. I'm like, oh, shut up with your.
As long as they're not Zytetics again, I'm all good.
Well, not only were those pewter, but they had like 17 parts, and you're like, liquid welding them together, and the ones Steve painted looked way better than the ones we painted.
And you only needed like 400 of them for that game. It felt like they went on forever.
Well, Kevin sent me so many of them. I'm like, well, why not? It's supposed to be a hive. There's supposed to be literally thousands of them.
We put so many of these together.
Sitting in this very room.
In this very room. All right, sidetracked. Sorry. My concern as I watch you set up games, and not so much as a player, but as I watch you set up games when using those maps, and more so the spiral bound ones or the book ones, is that when you have those instances that a player gets a step ahead of everybody else, or one or two players have opened the door and gone through the threshold and it's on a different page of the map.
What's the matter, I bet if I step off the map, am I going to fall off your
now
world?
You're stuck with, you can't quite turn the page because you have players on the other piece still. And so you got to usher everybody through the door to turn the page to find out where folks are. The difference and advantage I find with the 3D printed pieces and the terrain pieces is that doesn't happen. They're more flexible for that.
Correct. And you have to be careful about group size too, because I used to run much bigger games at Origins, and like once you get past 6, it gets very unwieldy in those little, because like, oh, everybody's grouped up in the hall. This would be a perfect place for a grenade. Jim, this is a dungeon crawl. This is not modern combat action. Nobody's throwing grenades. Okay, a fireball. Oh God, that would be awful.
So when you set up a terrain game, how do you manage, you typically cover our entire dining room table with the leaf included in it. So it's quite a big space. How do you manage not seeing that your players don't see the entire dungeon?
So that is where the wonders of cardstock comes in. And you line the top of the cardstock, and it doesn't look as cool as having sections of the table covered up. But I don't have Matt Mercer money, so I'm not quite there yet. So the cardstock, and it's always funny because they'll be like looking under the edge, and be like, there's sci-fi, or that looks like dungeon, or oh, I've never seen this piece before, or, different things like that. So they're always trying to peek behind the curtain a little bit, and I'm like, come on, great thought thinkers put a lot of time into this. Don't be messing around behind the curtain. So yeah, cardstock always works. I know there are some people that when they run with 3D terrain, whether it's Dwarven Forge or 3D printed or whatever, they're laying it out piece by piece.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, right? I'm like, I can't.
Panic attack.
I can't even imagine doing that. It's like, oh, they went the other way. Where'd I stack that crap? I mean, again, what kind of giant library of just random bookshelves just stacked with a train, and they have there's piece 3 and it goes down there. I can't even. I've seen it done before, and I'm like, oh gosh, you're on a different level than I am, because I'm like, nope, couldn't do that. Where it gets tricky sometimes, and you have to be a little Deus Ex Machina. They're like, oh, we're gonna hack into the if you're doing sci-fi or space or something like that, we're gonna hack in and get a map of the complex. Nope, that's not available. That part of the hard drive's corrupted or something. Aren't there maps on the walls? Not in this place. They didn't care about fire code. I'm like, no, you are not getting that map. And I have printed ones out. In Dungeon Print Studio, you can print them out, and I take digital photographs, and sometimes I print those out, so I know how to rebuild it when I get to Origins or Gen Con or whatever. That is why having a color laser printer is definitely a must for my GM prep. But yeah, that's one of the ones, and looking at those, and I'm like, oh no, you're not peering that far behind the curtain. Nice try, hack something else, smarty. What, the engineer was killed? Oh, and you're just a bunch of trigger pullers? I'm sorry.
I find the cardstock is also very easy because it's reusable. There's
some of it that's pizza stained and other stains, and
cardstock that is specifically gameplay.
It's got the big binder clip on it, and
but it's easy and you put it in pieces. It prevents the cats a lot from walking in. Our cats love the rooms look like boxes, and
And they will
come
sit
they'll
in them.
sit in the middle of the box of the room. Or we had one cat that would steal pieces.
She would steal miniatures.
She would steal
And when we
miniatures.
moved that chair out, and she would stick them in your office.
Yeah.
There was an armchair in there, and we moved the chair, and there were a dozen of the little plastic Dungeons and Dragons minis that were just collected in a little pile. And I'm like, I was wondering where Goblin number 3 went. Like, what the hell?
You had torches one time with little
That
like
that
fuzzy
went in the
pieces on
that went
top.
in the wall sconces.
She loved those.
Yeah, that was the one dwarven. I was like the deluxe room set that had the torches that actually went into little hooks on the wall, and yeah, those disappeared. I'm like, I got those out, right?
The other part is they become very easy to reveal only as much as you really want
Right.
to. You know, it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet. You can pull it halfway back if that's how big the room is. You can take the whole piece off and show. So it really becomes so modular to be able to only reveal what you need them to see next.
And for video game players, have you ever explored a map that's all, dark, and as you move your character, and I'm thinking Civilization, the whole map's dark. As you go on, little pieces around you become revealed. So that's very intuitive to the players. And they're like, oh, well, I move forward. I can see this far. I can move that far. I'm going to get to see this much. And invariably, there's a corner. I'm like, oh, what's around the corner? I don't know. You want to stick your head around the corner? I don't know. Do I want to stick my head around the corner? It's up to you. You have player agency. I'm not telling you what to do.
Always feel dangerous if the GM asks you that question.
I'll always feel dangerous. And usually it's just to mess with their minds, but that's half the fun. There's supposed to be that element of the unknown and maybe a touch of fear. I mean, not everything has to be Call of Cthulhu where you're going to die or go insane or both.
True. I also find through the years the advantage of using terrain at a con game. And your prep, different conversation. Your prep for a home campaign versus a con game is very different. And the aspect of how you'll play those is very different. But the use of terrain, we've talked a lot about dungeon crawls, but I find it really useful, and they're more fun to build. Your use of terrain for zombie games at a con is a ton of fun and makes it quick and easy to keep track of where your characters are, where your players are, what's happening, and where the zombies are coming next. So that terrain for a zombie game at a con also opens up the door because it's so much broader on where are we when the zombies attack today. We've built
a lot.
Gosh, a lot. What's one of your favorite zombie terrain you've built for a con?
I didn't necessarily do terrain for this one, but I had some set pieces, and it was kind of a weird game. It was called Back in the Day. It was about the zombie apocalypse happens at like a villages style retirement home, and the zombie wave happens there, except all the people that live in this one area were old war horses. They were all retired veterans, and
I loved that one.
And had, just crazy, Guadalcanal and Easterling 73 and all these things. Oh, screw that, wait till the zombie apocalypse. And so there are these crusty, rusty old war horses that, put their war face on one more time to defend the villages from the zombie wave and apocalypse. The other one, again, just thinking zombie games with crazy ideas, was the one Make the Best of It, was from an article in Make Magazine, if you remember that one. Make Magazine is I think they still publish it. I think I've seen it at Micro Center recently. It was magazines are dying off, but it was just a little 2-page spread, and it was like, you're at your house on your average Saturday night, and all of a sudden you look out and the streets are alive with zombies and they're pounding on your door. You have an hour before they break down the door. Here's the 20 things that are in your garage. How are you going to defend yourself? And it's like, there's a lawnmower and a can of gas and the stuff you would find in an average homeowner's garage and, the great Midwest and middle class households. And so I took that and ratcheted up a step because I think we were watching Storage Wars at the time as well. And I said, what if you're, kind of being, the zombie wave is pushing you and you seek refuge in kind of out in the middle of nowhere. There's a self-storage between Cincinnati and Louisville that we drive by on this hill. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, that's a weird place for a self-storage. And that was where I set the game. It's just before you get to Carrollton. And it was like, hey, what are you going to find in here? You show up and you have these various, normie kind of victims,
Right.
and you have some bolt cutters, and you have an hour before the zombies get there, and there's 8 storage units in this little fenced in country thing. How are you going to defend yourself? And you have to defend yourself for the next 3 hours until help arrives. The military or whatever is going to fly you out of there, but until then you have to survive with what you can find in there. And that game, I ran that at a couple different cons. When I ran it at the open house, one of my regulars, he knew the author of the article, and he called him on the phone when we're playing the game, and he's like, Mark or whatever his name was. He goes, you'll never guess what my friend Jim's using your article for. And he's like, here, talk to the author. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's
hey,
so
Mark.
cool.
Yeah, that was the Smith brothers, but yeah, they know everybody.
They do.
But they knew the guy that wrote the article, and I'm like, wow, talk about small worlds.
Yes.
So just like different training, and I had some little set pieces and different bits and pieces that was in there. But that was fun. As far as big builds I've ever done, and it wasn't a zombie game per se, but the Barrier Peaks module from Dungeons and Dragons, where when ray guns were introduced to D&D, and every 14-year-old, me included, wanted like, oh, I want my fighter to have a ray gun. Hell yeah, let's go. Because this spaceship had crashed into, your medieval Dungeons and Dragons world in the Barrier Peaks, and weird things are happening, and the radiation leaked, and there were robots and corrupted, they were these little twig people that kind of look like mini Groots, and the whole 9 yards. And so we built the spaceship out of the sci-fi, but played it with D&D characters. So they were going, I think we called it Return to the Barrier Peaks or something like that. And it was just an homage to that game. But that was fun, building the spaceship, playing sci-fi in D&D rules.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh yes, you can get. And then I think I ran another one of that. I ran it with the Rift system as well, where same kind of scenario, but you were on a different level playing field, trying to figure out who these aliens were that invaded Earth and that. So got a little double dip out of the build.
Cool. I am always impressed in your ability when you build these out, and as you said earlier, like the difference between a map and your imagination is you can create what you want this to look like and run like. When you create those and take it to a con, your acknowledgement that this takes time to set up and time to tear down, and making a minor change to your dungeon to be able to use for a second scenario and a different game that so often are a different system,
right,
a different genre, a different theory, and be able to just make that adjustment then and play a completely different game with so many of the same pieces of your terrain, and really get, for con, bang for your buck, where you get to use the terrain then for most of a day to be able to enhance the play for more players than just the 6 who came for the first game. And I've always been really impressed with how you do that and how you make those adjustments to the terrain for that.
And one of the ones I recently did was Chaos Earth, but I also ran it from the perspective, they found this golden age bunker, and oh, what sort of wonderful secrets were in it. Well, it turns out the secrets were survivors of the apocalypse that had developed superpowers. So I used Heroes Unlimited rules, and so the first group were coming from the outside in, trying to figure out what was going on there, and a dungeon crawl, but a sci-fi kind of post-apocalyptic dungeon crawl. And then from the book, The Monsters Know What They're Doing, I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting to let the players play as the monsters, or these newly erupting kind of superhero vigilantes inside this bunker against these invaders that were trying to come, flush them out, or steal their technology, or make them stop what they're doing defending the local populace. So it was fun getting to play both sides of that. Was a really interesting concept, and seeing how the players played the adversaries on each side differently than I did as a GM. And I ran that one at the open house. I ran that one at Origins. So I ran it a couple times. And so every time I ran that one, because I don't like doing them multiple times, because it's like, oh, it's old hat, I want to do something new. That one was interesting from the dynamic of learning what they did and how they played it, and how that was different than I thought it out, or I played it as the GM playing them as NPCs. So I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. So that's a cool idea. I'm going to use that against the players next time. Wahaha. Thanks for teaching me to get your fellow players.
I think as a player as well, I'm thinking the last couple cons we've been to and I've played, it is easier to jump into a system you don't know with really good maps, certainly with terrain. It just kind of brings it to life. I played one, the little guy and I played
Battle Lords of the 23rd Century?
Battle Lords of the 23rd Century, which had a lot of set maps that went with it. And the maps were good, but there was a piece of me that's like, this could be better with some terrain pieces that allowed us to move around and explore. Because the maps were also very small. Like they were 2 to an 8 by 11 sheet. So yes, I could see what I was doing and where I was going, but it was still a challenge because the scale was so small.
Right.
And a larger scale, either map or certainly some terrain, would have made that easier to jump into. I was a complete novice to that system and that game.
And after playing it a couple times, you still are, but that's okay.
I still am. I think in some ways, too, it would have made it easier for those jumping into the game because we ended up playing with a lot of folks from their club who knew the game very well, knew that module very well, and were doing their best to kind of lead us where we were going and feed us just enough information for us to be able to keep going because we survived to the end, which was exciting and unusual, apparently. But But
we'll rent your armor out and resell it at the secondhand store. Yeah.
Terrain would have fleshed that out a little bit better and would have really increased kind of the fun on that. I think you're right. We've played some of the other ones. I'm gonna get all the names wrong. Are you ready?
I'm buckled up and ready.
We played the investigator one that's kind of like Blade Runner.
It was Blade Runner.
There you go.
By Free League. And you made me think of that one when you were talking about not necessarily terrain, but handouts and value add things. There were so many, and I know it was the module that came with the box set, but there were newspaper articles and there were all kinds of different, there were dossiers and files and stuff that were handed out. And that, again, was thousands of words there that you put in your hand and look at and be like, oh, I get it. I understand.
And helped me from saying, could you tell me again what that girl said when we interviewed her? Wasn't there a sheet of paper? And having the GM have to repeat all that over and over again, it was really helpful. But that is not a game, I think, that would have done well with a terrain.
Again, much more theater of the mind, but had such cool set pieces and little bits of handouts and things that added to... kind of told that story and kind of put you in that world without being overwhelming. But yeah, terrain, you never would have been able to do that. So much better translated to theater of the mind because it wasn't, and really terrain, open air zombie games and stuff works for that. But I mean, terrain is really dungeon crawling. And there's some city pieces and there's big spaceships and things like that. But at the end of the day, certainly in a big spaceship, that's a dungeon crawl. In space, because it's awesome. And then some of the city ones, those are more, but that plays more to your zombie game and moving around doing things like that. But again, you're confined to that area. You don't run off the edge of the map because that's what there is. And the nice thing about those, and the overwhelming majority of con players, they show up and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this looks so cool." And they buy in because they want to play with those toys in those worlds. They don't want to be like, oh, well, what's off the edge of the map? Because most of them aren't jerks. And even if they are, they're like, whoa, what if we did this? I'd have Deus Machina'd your butt right back into the terrain. I mean, but that's the nice thing. It's like, and I like to take that stuff and really take it over the top. It drives me crazy. Some of the badge prices and then charging for events. And like, I know we have to pay for our space with our club and things like that. And they have all those things cost money, but I'm like, you're paying for an event. I want to give you bang for your buck.
It is a huge value add. Absolutely.
My players have no idea how, I should be charging them.
Like, and thinking about value add, the Mouse
Guard,
when we played it, again, as a con game, I don't feel like a map might have worked. I don't feel like terrain necessarily would have enhanced it, but a map might have helped some. An avatar would have been amazing
Right.
to have had with that and really helped me. Oh, this is what my little mouse guy looks like. Right. And especially because that's a very storyteller game based on what your mouse's characteristics are. And I could see in a campaign being able to build on your avatar and add little pieces to him then as he learned more things and adventured more. Now I'm excited about little mice.
You're in luck. Somewhere buried in the tote of Bones minis that are unpainted are little mouse guard-esque fighters.
Maybe you could do a mouse guard at your next con game then.
Because I don't run enough different systems as it is. I mean, it's somewhere back there on the shelf. I did the Kickstarter for it.
What do you think? Like, we talked a lot about our opinions. Let me ask you a question, though, about from the standpoint of historically looking at role-playing games. What do you think kind of Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax would feel about terrain and gridded maps kind of entering more into the play of D&D and these types of games?
You know, I think that's a great question and certainly an awesome you're welcome.
Thanks.
And I don't know if I have a great answer. Again, read and listened to a lot of different books on that. And I think if you look at certainly Gary's background as a war gamer. And those all had, they started out with, punch out chits and maps and things like that, and graduated to, lead soldiers before they were making them out of pewter, before we know the evils of lead. Now, they were painted. I'm sure everyone is fine. That affected no one's health. But, thinking about the old, the Avalon Hill Gettysburg that had all these minis and different things like that. I'm
thinking Napoleon, right? Like that whole Waterloo where it's a whole half a table filled with little
you got,
figurines.
Duke Zeifried's big sand table with all those, 15 millimeter minis. Hey, Mo, you gonna knock my camera back into alignment after you knocked it out earlier?
Oh.
Speaking of big set pieces, yeah, will you rotate me back just a little? He rotated me off kilter. There we go. Thank you.
Hi.
Mo wants to be part of the show. Welcome, Mo. It's not Catterday, buddy. It's not all about you anymore. But there we go. You really knocked me a year now.
I knew he was gonna
get his tail in there.
Reveal the chaos.
Look, and there's a spot. So anyway, I think Gary really liked miniatures and looking at, chainmail, and it was meant to be skirmishy tabletop with those role playing elements, and it is trouble separating myth from fact. Where Gary and Dave were and who really drove that. But knowing they were both war gamers, and certainly it seemed like some of the early stuff, Dave Arneson was certainly as interested in, certainly had his Blackmore campaign, but had a lot of seaborne stuff and made ships for Hearst models and did a bunch of those things. So I think they loved and appreciated all those. And looking at some of those early modules, because we don't have as much published from Dave as we do from Gary, but looking at, the Tomb of Horrors and the different, modules and those crazy maps, imagine seeing that in Dwarven Forge or, Fat Dragon stuff printed out. And would have, I think they would have been over the moon to see something like that and not felt constricted, because a dungeon itself is naturally constricting. You're in there and you have limited directions. Well, I want to go this way. Well, there's a dungeon wall there, dingus. That's not a choice. You want to start, burrowing and tame a Zorn or a Bleed or something and start digging through the walls, then knock yourself out.
I think the flexibility and non-constriction comes because the Dwarven Forge and the Fat Dragon, those pieces are so modular, right? They're not big rooms that you have to connect together. Each individual piece is modular, so it gives you that flexibility and freedom. I think you're right on, as we've looked at some of the history, that they would have appreciated a modularity of being able to build those caverns and that terrain in. And even as we think about, I think back to what they used to take to the cons, that giant setup,
Yeah, the big sand tables and stuff.
right? And they, all I can remember is out of the storage unit that they had like 4 hours to go clear out
Oh,
when they were going
the
bankrupt,
castles and
and the castles.
all the stuff that you're using foam cutters for, and using Mod Podge and all those different things. And now you're like, oh, I want a dungeon wall, and 2 hours or less later, you have a 3D printed one, and you can slap chop paint that up in no time. You do an assembly line. You can have a whole bunch done in a weekend, and certainly you put a couple weeks of effort into it, you can have a big old dungeon going, and you can reuse that. It's like, oh, I want some more, I want bigger, oh, I want some cavern style, and mix those in.
I also think those early TSR folks were wanting to be on a cutting edge. I think they would have been early adopters to a lot of this technology that's made it easy to make other terrain and map pieces. And I think their willingness to figure that out, to employ actual cartographers to make maps for your books and your game, I think they would easily have adopted and said, yes, let's also make these pieces that you can fit together. You're not allowed to call it Lego, that you can fit together in a brick piece style. I think they absolutely would have been in favor of that and would have gone for it, and still have said, the theater of the mind becomes, how did you put it together,
Right. What's
and
that?
figure it
What's
out?
that look like in your mind as these battles are going on, and you're seeing it? And sure, you have your mini, your avatar there, and the different pieces. And I always get a kick out of how serious some of the players take. Well, what's on that wall? I'm like, I don't know. What's it look like? Oh, there's a panel on that wall. Well, sure enough, there's a computer panel on that wall. What can I do with it? I don't know. What can you do with it? And and more often than not, like, what you see is what you get. I remember there was a chest of drawers miniature that I 3D printed out, and it was there was a displacer cat that was in Castle Davenport. And like I'm like, well, he uses this as a scratching post. And I mean, it was I took my scrying tool and just put some big scratches in it, and put a little wash on there, and it looked like, and they're like, gosh, there looks like there's big gouges on there. I said, oh yeah, it's old furniture. Do you think there's anything more to it than that? I don't know. Do you think there's anything more to it than that? And the displacer cat was using it as a scratching post. Well, sure enough.
Sure enough.
What you see is what you get. And there's sometimes I'm like, oh, I never noticed that. Oh, I'm going to have to make up something right here. How about that? I'm like, oh, it must be one that Diane painted. I don't remember that piece. I'm like,
Oh,
that was cool looking.
I thought we were talking about mistakes in painting. So
Oh, no.
I'm getting much better.
You're a fabulous painter.
I'm getting much better.
Truly appreciate all your efforts.
All right. Any other thoughts on maps,
So,
terrain, theater of the mind?
So I have a question for you as a player, not a GM, and looking at the advances in technology. Certainly, we've talked about 3D printing, and I mean, some of the model making even years ago, where you could use your plaster of Paris and make some of those Hearst models and the different I mean, we use them to make cupcakes and candy now, but I mean, people were making
Silicone.
yeah, they were using their silicone
pieces, yeah.
pieces to pour, and I'm like, gosh, that sounds like a lot of work. And then I bought some Dwarven Forge. I'm like, oh, that's expensive too, but hey, it's painted, so and there's your takeoffs. As technology continues to advance, and there's some pretty cool looking thing, and we saw World of Warcraft's influence on 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons when they tried to turn it almost into a tabletop skirmish game as opposed to a role playing game. And looking at that technology, and as some of these virtual tabletops and Roll20 are starting to come out, and you're starting to have assets for that, do you think that there is a draw to a younger demographic to want to play electronically and see those things? Because as good a subpar painter I am of painting set pieces, little pieces of dungeon terrain or sci-fi terrain, those look whiz bang, and there are a few keystrokes for some of these programmer developer geniuses.
Feel like you need to buckle up.
Oh, oh.
I have two opinions.
Let me have a drink here. Mm.
So I'm gonna go at it kind of two ways. So remind me to come back to the second one.
Oh, okay. Remember, folks, there's part two. We'll come back to
part
it.
two. Initially, my thought is yes. I don't think Dungeons and Dragons would have made those moves if they didn't see an aspect and draw of that in the community. Parentheses, I've seen them do lots of stupid things that was not part of the community that backfired on them.
Do you remember when I think it was when E3 shut down and Gen Con had the whole giant electronic gaming section?
Right.
How long did that last?
Right. Okay.
And it was noisy as could be, too.
Done lots of things that didn't really flesh out. It is hard to compete with a video game. There is just a reality of that. Looking kind of historically as D&D came up and role-playing games initiated with a group who didn't have video games as they were younger, and so we're growing up with those two things side by side. It worked really well.
And as cool as Heroes of Might and Magic looked in 1986 on my Commodore with its, programmable sprites, the movie that played in my mind when we were doing Theater of the Mind and we were playing was always way better.
Always way better. It's a book versus a movie kind of thing. All right, so let's take, the 21 to 35-year-old currently who has grown up with computers probably in their home. They've had access to online video games and cassette video games and video games. Like, they've played that their whole life. Is their draw to a tabletop game the same? Maybe not. And so I think there is the potential that something like a virtual tabletop does have a draw to them.
Do you think it draws? Do you think it draws more to them or more to our age group and maybe younger, maybe some of the older millennials and some of the younger Gen Xers? Do you think it's a draw to them because they've moved throughout the country and their buddies are all over the place?
I think it provides an access.
And now you want to play with Fred in Florida and George in Boston and your other two buddies that are back home in Texas and your other friend you met at a con that lives in Kansas.
I think it does have that draw, and it provides you that sense of community of who you used to play with and continuing to play with, or folks you met at a con and continuing to play with them, versus having to go out and find a game store in town and find a group who might be playing there and sit down with strangers around a table who become those people that you play with all the time. I think there's a possibility of that. I think kind of 2020 and the where everything went virtual showed us the potential of that.
I mean, we were gaming on
of doing it.
We weren't using. I mean, Roll20 and some of these other virtual tabletops were not quite there yet, but we had 2 cameras and ran 5th edition, and the little guy helped, and he was on the other camera, and it worked okay.
It worked okay.
But I would rather sit across a table from those 5 or 6 guys.
And I think for your group, it worked okay because you knew it was temporary.
Right.
You weren't going to be stuck playing virtual for a long time. So it worked. All right, let me look at 15 to 21-year-olds right now, though. Here's part 2. This is a group that is going back to landlines.
Right. Flip phones and, embracing physical media.
I don't think they have any interest in playing a virtual tabletop. I think as they continue to define authentic, and as us older folk continue to figure out what authentic means to them, authentic means sitting at a table, looking eye to eye to folks, putting your hands on the game and the pieces, and actually building that community and that fellowship and being with each other to play it. And probably better than us turning off the distractions of texting back home or checking Facebook in between your turn. I think they're not going to play virtual nearly as much as we've seen the group before them do.
Even though there's that convenience factor there, because it's inauthentic.
It's inauthentic.
All right. I was curious your take as a player and not a long term,
Yeah.
there and just and I was definitely thinking about that younger generation that they don't want a smartphone and they dig records, and I know there's always been people that like the records, but as tapes and CDs and owning your media is making come back. I'm excited. I'm like, oh, does that mean there'll be more DVDs available to buy? Like,
Right.
tired of buying the digital ones and Steven Spielberg turning the guns into walkie-talkies. Come
I'm
on,
so
Steve.
excited that article kind of promoting that they're looking at doing that came out 2 weeks after I almost threw out all our CDs.
It was just
I
the jewel
didn't throw them
cases.
out,
It was
though.
just the jewel cases.
I looked at throwing out all the CDs.
Them's fighting words.
They
Man,
take up a lot of space. We have a lot of CDs.
they're great in those little binders you used to drive around in your car with and flip through to stick in your dash.
They are, but do you know that I emptied that cabinet and it's overflowing in the tote?
That's right,
all
folks.
those
We've
little
gone through
binders.
GM prepped marriage therapy right here. Fellowship of Geeks. We cover all the topics: tech, games, movies, marriage therapy, the whole 9 yards.
And
All
the
I know is
essence of it all
I'm
is
probably
communication. You just have to communicate
that's right.
well.
I'm probably gonna have to buy the White Album again, nevertheless.
I'm positive Metallica will make you buy their music all over again.
I'm sure they will. Lars is man. I feel for the guy.
Lars's ears just tingled. His
That's right.
hands itched.
Thinking, oh man, money. Huh? Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, it's an inner. I am very. The other part is we're a little bit of students of generations, and so I'm very interested to see kind of what happens next and what this turn looks like, and whether they stick with it or whether this sounds really interesting when parents are imposing it on them as youth, and when they get to be 21 and 25, do they stick with it, or do they fall in the rabbit hole of technology some of the rest of us have fallen into? So it'll be interesting to see.
The evolution of gaming from LED minis to pewter minis to acrylic pieces to digital, and I mean I'm sticking with my physical miniatures and my maps and my 3D printed terrain and some of my plastic terrain I buy from other places. When we get to holodecks, I'll switch over. Until then, because I mean that doesn't take up a ton of space except for that big giant room and the freaking computers that run it. But yeah, you get to go holodeck. I'm ready to go virtual. But until then, I'm gonna stick with my my physical media and watch my DVDs and paint my minis poorly.
There you go. While listening to your CDs.
3D print some terrain on my ever improving 3D printers, but not making some virtual light bend thing. Oh, just reconfigure the pixels and the photons and it'll be all better. There you go. Oh.
Sure.
When I was a little boy.
I am positive when that comes about that you will get that, because you have been an early adopter of technology for a very long time. And you do gravitate towards picking up new technology quickly and mastering it. So I have no doubt that when the first holodecks come out, you will barely wait for the beta version and go grab one.
As long as they don't have to, I get it. And they're like, oh, you have to download patches for 3 days. I'm like, oh, for God's sake. I've been waiting for this thing. It'll be delivered like one of those little mini houses on the trailer. And,
hitting the refresh button like the little man was.
like the fetal monkey waiting for Battlefield 6 to
Battlefield
go
6,
live. Go live.
reload.
Come on, go
I
live.
bought the fast thing. How come it's not loading?
My holodeck only gets 60 frames. What is this, 16-bit holodeck? Data, where are you, man? All right, we digress. So what do you guys think? Do you like physical media? Do you like theater of the mind? Do you want, you want to go back to LED minis because they have a little more heft than the pewter ones do? Make sure you seal them first. Don't need anybody getting lead
You
poisoning
can't chuck
there.
those across the dining room when you're mad.
The pewter ones break. The lead ones, they kind of mush because they're a little bit softer there. The bones ones, they bounce. Sometimes the paint chips, sometimes it
Very
doesn't.
seldom break something else.
Yeah,
Throwing the bones ones.
yes, that is true. And the Dwarven Forge, especially the original ceramic, that'll take a chunk out of the dining room floor. But most of the 3D printed stuff, that PLA is versus the dining room floor, no problems on the hardwood there. So, but yeah, what do you guys think? Please let us know in the comments. Do you like Theater of the Mind? Do you want your 3D printed stuff? Or are you already playing virtual and you think, what are these old people talking about? Please let us know. Share your thoughts. We would love to discuss more. So for Fellowship of Geeks, I'm Jim.
I'm Diane.
I'm Diane. Enjoy your gaming in whatever manner you can get it.